Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with creamy chicken toast. That's right, there's an old saying that says great cooks do not need recipes. All they need is reminders. Well, here, hopefully you're going to get both. A great comforting chicken recipe and a reminder of just how easy it is to make a great cream sauce by simply reducing cream. And yes, based on this intro, I am assuming you're all great cooks. Or at least you will be soon. But even if you're not, this is still going to work out wonderfully. And to get started, the first thing we're going to do is cut up a chicken breast. And as far as portioning goes, I'll usually go with 1 chicken breast per person. But this time I had a freakishly large chicken breast, which is going to be plenty for 2 portions. And what we'll do after removing the tenderloin is go ahead and cut this into semi-equal slices, because eventually we're going to cube this chicken up. And there are 2 different approaches for that. We could cube it all up now while it's raw, and then add that to the sauce. Or we can partially cook our chicken and then cube it up and add it to the sauce near the end of the cooking time, which I personally think is the best way to go. And for the record, the only reason I'm slicing this chicken breast up is because it was so monstrously huge. I thought by cutting it up things would go a little faster. Okay, if you just have a couple thin normal-sized chicken breasts, you can just cook those as is. But either way, we'll go ahead and season both sides with salt before heading over to the stove, where we're going to place this in a lightly buttered skillet set over medium-high heat. And all we're going to need to do here is cook this for a couple minutes on each side until these pieces sort of firm up, but the inside sort of stays medium rare, which I know is a semi-disturbing instruction. But don't worry, it's going to be perfectly safe, because like I said, we're going to finish cooking this in the sauce. And to take the edge off, keep this in mind. Even if you undercook this, or it cooks all the way, the recipe will still work. That's just going to affect when exactly we put the chicken in the cream sauce. So please try to relax. And like I said, we'll just give that a couple minutes on each side till it kind of firms up and possibly takes on a little bit of color. And we will simply let that sit until it's cool enough to cut up. And then what we'll do while our chicken is chillaxing is head back to the stove and reduce our heat to medium. And we'll use that same pan to cook our veggies, which in my case are some green onions, as well as some diced red bell pepper, and for a little bit of kick, some jalapeno. And we will also toss in the traditional giant pinch of salt. And what we'll do is cook these veggies stirring on medium heat for a couple minutes until they just start to soften up. Or at least that's what I'm doing. You go ahead and cook them as long as you want. And I should mention, the amounts of these veggies really don't matter. In fact, I don't even think I'm going to give amounts in the blog post. I mean, why do I have to decide everything? You put in how much you want. But anyway, I cook those veggies for a couple minutes, at which point they look like this. And we'll go ahead and raise our heat to medium-high, at which point we're going to deglaze with a splash of chicken broth, or water, or wine, or nothing. Or if you wanted, you could just go straight to the cream. But I think by adding and deglazing with a little bit of broth, we're going to introduce a little more chicken flavor, which for a chicken recipe is usually a pretty good idea. And since we're just using a splash, this is only going to take a minute or 2. And then what happens next when our liquid is almost but not quite evaporated is we can pour in the co-star of the show, our heavy cream, which I think is somewhere around 32 to 35% butterfat. But don't quote me on it. And I think it depends on where you live. But regardless, we will stir that in. And then to finish this sauce, all we have to do is continue cooking until this reduces down to our desired thickness, as determined by the boss of the sauce, which of course is you. And this is where we need to have a little chat about risk versus reward. Because the higher you crank your heat, the faster the sauce reduces. But if you crank it too high, like I'm sort of doing here, it will boil over and completely mess up your burner. And guess who gets blamed? That's right, me. So the point is, you want to go with as high a heat as you can without it boiling over. And right here, I'm actually going to back mine down a little bit, so we do not experience the aforementioned tragedy. And what we can do while we're waiting for our cream to reach the perfect thickness is go ahead and cube up our cooled chicken. And I'm showing you what size I like to cut mine, which may or may not be the size you want to cut yours. And the precise measurement really doesn't matter, as long as they're all fairly consistent so they finish at the same time. Speaking of which, depending on what we see when we cut into this, that's going to determine when exactly we add this back to the pan. Or if you're cubing this up and you notice it's cooked all the way through, we'll just add it at the end and just warm it up. But if it is medium rare, like mine is here, then we actually get to cook it for a few minutes in the sauce, which I think might add a little more flavor and possibly better texture. But either way, we're going to cut up our chicken and transfer it back onto the plate, along with any and all accumulated juices. And then the other thing we could prep while our sauce is reducing would be some fresh tarragon, which I think is one of the keys to this dish. And if you're not familiar with it, it looks like this. And why I love it so much with chicken is it has a beautiful sweet flavor, okay, sort of similar to the sweetness of basil, but with a little bit of a licorice finish. And if you're using it, do not pick the leaves off one at a time. Just strip that stem through your fingers against the grain, and all those leaves will come off easily. At which point we'll chop that up and reserve it till needed. And then, theoretically, by this time, our cream is reduced and has started to thicken up. So we'll go ahead and get in there with a spoon to see where we're at. And it's almost there. But I decided I wanted it a little thicker, so I gave it a couple more minutes. And as usual, you're going to have to make that call. So I let mine go a little longer until it was exactly where I wanted. And then once our sauce does reach our desired thickness, we can go ahead and finish this up with a spoon of creme fraiche, which is optional. But as you know, I have a creme fraiche fetish, and I think it adds a little extra something. And we will also add our chicken and accumulated juices back in, and we'll give that a stir. And basically this dish is done when your chicken is heated all the way through and or cooked all the way through, depending on how much you cooked it the first time. Okay, since mine was a little bit medium rare, I'm going to have to give this a couple minutes. And as usual, near the end here, we're going to have to give it a taste and add some seasoning if we want, which I did. I went ahead and tossed in some kosher salt and some freshly ground black pepper, as well as a little shake of cayenne. And basically that's it. Right, the only thing we have left to do is stir in our fresh tarragon, which I do not want to do until the last second. So at this point, we'll go ahead and turn off the heat. And we'll go ahead and toast or grill up a nice thick piece of bread. And place that in a warm bowl. And once we have that set, then we can go back and add our fresh herb to our pan. And by the way, if you're wondering why our sauce went from white to yellow, that's what happens to a cream sauce if you let it sit for a couple minutes. Nothing to worry about. As soon as you stir it, it's going to be fine. And that's it. As soon as that's mixed in, we are ready to serve up. And I should mention I love this over bread. But if you don't, use some other starchy base. I mean, you are, after all, hosting this creamy chicken toasting. But if you want to be the Nick Price of your rice, that would also be beautiful. Or pasta or potato. All right, you get the idea. But anyway, we'll go ahead and serve that up. With, of course, plenty of that super simple, but devastatingly delicious cream sauce. And for one final last touch, I sprinkled over a little sliced green onion. And that's it. What I'm calling creamy chicken toast is done. And ready to comfort what ails you. So let me grab a fork and knife and dig in. And because we only partially cooked that chicken the first time, and just finished it for a minute or two at the end, it has stayed beautifully moist and tender, and has also added a little bit of extra chickeniness. Chickeniness. Is that a word? Definitely not. So instead, let's say it added some extra chicken flavor to the sauce. You're welcome, English teachers. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there's something about that bittersweet flavor of peppers that just pairs so beautifully with a cream sauce. So long story short, I love everything about this. The taste, the texture, and how it makes me feel better. And I was feeling pretty good before I even started eating. But anyway, that's it. Creamy chicken toast. It's a recipe and a reminder. Which reminds me, I went very simple here with green onions and peppers, but a dish like this is a perfect catch-all for all your seasonal produce. So just a little something to keep in mind. But no matter what you end up adding, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.